June, benching #1 high school. The air was as humid as a thick syrup. Thousands of teachers and students on the playground were being scorched by the blazing sun, yet no one dared move. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the center of the podium. There stood a girl in a white dress, like a lily untouched by dust, the only coolness in that stifling air. Sophia, undeniably the campus belle of Ben City #1 high school, the unattainable first love in every boy's dreams. At this moment, her fair cheeks flushed pink, clutching a pink envelope tightly in her hand. Her eyes held 3 parts shyness and 7 parts courage as she looked toward a certain direction in the crowd below the stage. "Ethan, I like you." Her clear voice, carried through the microphone, spread across the entire campus and instantly ignited everyone's hormones. Oh my God, a confession of the century. Damn, my youth is over. Who is Ethan? Which class is he in? Who does he think he is? The crowd blew up like a lake struck by a thrown stone. Countless gazes, envious, jealous, laced with venom, simultaneously shot toward the line of students from Senior 3 Class 1. There stood a boy with a slim build and an ordinary face. Ethan. He wore a school uniform faded from washing, head bowed, like a stone statue, completely out of place amid the surrounding clamor. In a last life, it was here in the same scene when Sophia shouted that name. He felt as if he had been struck by the most brilliant fireworks in the world, so happy he nearly fainted. He rushed onto the stage and, amid the students and teachers catcalling, excitedly took the letter and, like a fool, promised her a lifetime. For that promise, he gave up an Ivy League guaranteed admission that was within reach and repeated a year with her, taking the exam to go to the city she wanted. For her, he sold his parents' only house and took hundreds of thousands of dollars to start a business, hoping to give her a good life. For her, he drank on sales calls until his stomach ulcerated, went 3 days and nights without sleep to write code, and before turning 30, he had already grown a head of white hair. And what did he get in return? What he got in return was that on the eve of his company's IPO, Sophia took all his core technology and funds and threw herself into the arms of Beijing Circle playboy Jason. What he got in return was that at their grand wedding, he was invited as the ex-boyfriend and business partner to witness the ceremony, only to be contemptuously called in front of all the celebrities by Jason, a good dog who took 10 years to learn how to bite. What he got in return was Sophia linking arms with her newlywed husband, looking down on him as she apologized. "Ethan, I'm sorry, we're not from the same world. What you gave me, he can give with a flick of his finger. What he can give me, you could struggle your whole life and never reach." In the end, he died in the torrential rain after that wedding of a myocardial infarction, the result of a 10-year, absurdly self-indulgent delusion. Endless remorse and bitterness dragged his soul into the abyss, only to rebirth him back to the starting point of it all. "Ethan, what are you waiting for? Get up there. Damn, is this kid stupid or what?" The classmates around him shoved him, their voices full of disappointed anger. Ethan slowly lifted his head. His gaze was no longer the clear, excited look of the 17-year-old from his previous life, but a dead calm, like ashes after the burning of purgatory. It was a chilling tranquility that transcended his years. He looked at the radiant girl on the stage, the girl he had once loved to his core. In that moment, to his eyes, that pure and captivating face slowly overlapped with the hypocritical, harsh face from the wedding in his past life. How disgusting. "Ethan, in your past life, you were really blind." Under the gaze of thousands, he moved. He did not, as everyone expected, rush onto the platform. Instead, calm and step by step, he walked out of the line. He walked to the base of the podium, stopped, looked up, and met Sophia's expectant, sparkling eyes. The entire field fell silent in an instant. Everyone held their breath, waiting for the words, "I do." Sophia's mouth couldn't help but curve into a slight smile. She had even already decided how. Once Ethan came up, she would coyly throw herself into his arms. She loved the feeling of being the center of attention, loved the sense of control that came from toying with the school's most outstanding boy. Ethan's excellence, his unwavering devotion to her, were the brightest medals she flaunted. However, the two words Ethan said next were like two ice-forged blades, instantly piercing all her pride and fantasies. "You are not worthy." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly through the still-open microphone and reached everyone's ears. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. On the playground, there was a deathly silence. Everyone thought they were hearing things. The smile on Sophia's face froze instantly, then shattered bit by bit. She looked at the cold-eyed youth on the stage in disbelief, her voice trembling. "Ethan, what did you say?" A faint, endlessly scornful curve lifted the corner of Ethan's mouth. He didn't repeat it, because there was nothing to say to someone who was dead. In his mind, Sophia, along with the foolish version of himself from his previous life, had already been buried by his own hand at Jason's wedding. After saying those two words, he didn't even glance at her again. Under the school's faculty and students' looks, like they had seen a ghost, he turned and calmly walked toward the school gate. Behind him was Sophia's face, shifting from red to white to blue, ultimately contorted completely by an overwhelming sense of humiliation. And with it, an unprecedented storm of public opinion was about to sweep across the entire campus. But none of that had anything to do with him anymore. He was going to the internet cafe. He was going to seize that bloody future that belonged to him and was about to change everything. Crazy. Ethan is absolutely crazy. How dare he? That's Sophia. Rejecting Sophia in front of the whole school. Does he still want to stay in Bin City? I recorded it. Oh my God, the show of the year. If this video gets on the forum, won't it blow up? The moment Ethan stepped out of the school gate, the campus behind him was like a powder keg ignited, exploding completely. He could imagine what would happen next. He would be labeled a jerk, a maniac, ungrateful. The counselor would call him in for a talk. The principal would meet with his parents. Busybodies would dig up his family background, try to find a reason for his audacity. And Sophia would play the perfect victim. She would cry, appear fragile and bewildered, and then her admirers and supporters would come at him like mad dogs. In his previous life, that was exactly what he did. He went to war with the whole world to defend Sophia. Ridiculous. Ethan's footsteps never faltered. He walked straight into the corner flying internet cafe, filled with smoke and the crackling sounds of keyboards. 2011. This was a magical year. The iPhone 4S had not yet been released. Facebook had only just become popular, and the mobile internet wave had not yet swept across the world. And something called Bitcoin was at that time still a neglected legend confined to geek circles. At that moment, its price was undergoing a correction after its first surge, falling from $30 to under $5. Countless early players wailed, cut their losses, and exited, calling it the biggest scam in history. But Ethan knew this was no scam. This was the only fulcrum he had after reincarnation to move the world. He used an ID card to start up a machine and deftly opened an overseas trading website. The site was as crude as a phishing page, but Ethan knew it was one of the few channels available domestically at the moment to access Bitcoin. He logged into the account he'd used for 10 years in his previous life, and when he saw that familiar ID, his gaze grew somewhat dazed. Then he clicked the top-up button. He pulled several bank cards out of his backpack. Inside were all the pocket money and scholarships he'd ever had, plus the money he had obtained from his parents under the pretense of attending academic competition training. A total of $347,000. This was the love fund he had prepared in his previous life to confess to Sophia after the comprehensive academic ability test. He had planned to use this money to take her on a graduation trip and buy her that designer bag she wanted most. Now that I think about it, it's truly ironic. Ethan's expression didn't change at all. He transferred every cent from all his cards, leaving nothing, into that trading website account. Immediately after, he opened another page. It was a crude campus loan site known only within the circle. In his previous life, a classmate had been driven to jump off a building because of it. He hated that thing, but now he needed it. He used his own student information and the classmate records he borrowed from the homeroom teacher's office to quickly apply for maximum loans on a dozen different campus loan platforms. His method was neat and efficient. He exploited the huge early-stage verification loopholes in those platforms and completed all the operations before their databases synchronized. Half an hour later, his transaction account gradually showed up with $200,000. Including his own principal, the total came to $547,000. In 2011, for a high school student, this was an astronomical sum, a blood-stained debt large enough to drag him into an abyss of no return. Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. His mind flashed with the image of his parents' aged, worry-lined faces. In his previous life, his startup failed and debts piled up. His parents sold their only house to pay them off, moved into a damp basement, and in the end, worn down by poverty and illness, died of depression. In this life, he would never allow the tragedy to repeat. The last trace of hesitation in his eyes was completely replaced by coldness. He moved the mouse over the Bitcoin candlestick chart, staring at the price that was currently at a historical low, $4.8. Without a moment's hesitation, he clicked the buy button, then set the leverage to the maximum the platform allowed, 20 times. All in, betting his lives from 2 reincarnations, betting all his future. The moment the trade succeeded, the funds in his account turned into a string of numbers representing long contracts, worth nearly $10 million. Done. Ethan leaned back in his chair and let out a long, hoarse breath. He knew that from this moment on, his life had stepped onto a completely different track from 99.99% of the people in the world. Next, he only needed to wait. A month later, Bitcoin would launch into a magnificent, epic bull run because of news of a partnership with a European bank, surging all the way to several $100s. And his bloodstained stake would multiply by 1,000-fold, becoming a figure enough to drive anyone mad. He was about to get off the plane when the Nokia phone in his pocket suddenly began to vibrate like crazy. On the screen, 3 characters flashed. Sophia. A trace of bone-deep loathing flickered in Ethan's eyes. He hung up immediately, then skillfully added the number to his blacklist. Soon after, a second and third call followed in quick succession. It was his class monitor, his friends, and various people he knew or didn't know. He ignored them and pressed the power off button. The world was finally peaceful. He walked out of the internet cafe. The sunlight outside was still dazzling, but his mood was calmer than ever. The soul of his previous life had already been severed by his own hand. A new round of the game had begun, and he would be the only dealer. When Ethan returned home, it was already evening. The afterglow of the setting sun bathed the old apartment building in a warm golden hue, and the air was filled with the smell of cooking coming from the neighbors. This was a typical working-class family from the 90s. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, and a living room. The furniture had been used for over 10 years, but his mother kept everything spotless. "Ethan, you're home?" Mother Elizabeth was busy in the kitchen, tying on an apron. Hearing the door open, she poked her head out with a loving smile. But Ethan still keenly noticed the trace of unshakable worry between her brows. Father Richard Johnson sat on the living room sofa, wearing reading glasses and looking at a copy of the Bend City Evening News, his expression sullen and silent. The atmosphere at home was somewhat oppressive. Ethan knew the school's call had already come through. "Dad, Mom, I'm home." He calmly changed in his slippers and set his backpack on the sofa. "You actually came back." Richard Johnson slammed the newspaper onto the coffee table with a loud bang. "What on earth have you been doing at school today?" His voice trembled with anger. "Your mother and I have worked so hard to pay for your education, hoping you'd get into a good university and bring honor to the Johnson family. And what do? For the sake of a female classmate, you refuse even the guaranteed admission. And now you've caused such an ungrateful scandal in front of the whole school. What about your face? What about the Johnson family's reputation? You've disgraced us completely." In the previous life, faced with his father's thunderous fury, he chose silence and rebellion, which ultimately led to a complete break in their relationship. But in this life, Ethan's state of mind was already very different. He could understand his father's anger. He was an honest, upright worker who had worked diligently all his life and pinned his simplest hopes on his son. He didn't understand romance or poetry. He only knew that his son's success was the most important thing. "Dad, please don't be angry yet." Ethan's tone held no trace of agitation or grievance, only a steadiness beyond his years. "What you heard is the school's one-sided version. The truth isn't like that." Elizabeth carried the dishes out of the kitchen and hastily tried to smooth things over. "Richard, lower your voice. The boy just came home. Can't we talk about this calmly?" She turned to Ethan, her eyes a little red. "Ethan, tell your mother the truth. Did you and that girl called Sophia have a fight? Mom knows you like her, but you can't break a girl's heart like that in front of everyone. Now the school is buzzing, saying I'm what? Say, I'm a heartless man? Say, I toyed with feelings." A cold smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth. "Mom, do you think I'm that kind of person?" Elizabeth was stunned. She looked at her son before her and suddenly felt a sense of unfamiliarity. His gaze was too calm, so calm it made her uneasy. It didn't resemble that of a 17-year-old who had just gone through an emotional upheaval. It was more like that of an adult who had seen the world's hardships. Then why is that?" Elizabeth's voice had a trace of sobbing. Ethan didn't answer directly. He pulled out a chair, sat down opposite his father, and stared straight into his father's furious eyes. "Dad, Mom," he spoke slowly and clearly, word by word. "I refused Sophia, not out of sulking or momentary impulse. It's because I realize she and I are not on the same path. People with different principles can't work together. I gave up the guaranteed admission, and it wasn't for her. It was because I feel those Ivy League schools are not worthy of me." The moment he said that, Richard Johnson and Elizabeth were stunned. "You, what nonsense are you talking?" Richard Johnson was so angry he almost stood up. "You're saying Ivy League schools aren't good enough for you? Who do you think you are? Have you gone stupid from studying too much?" "I'm not stupid." Ethan's eyes shone remarkably. "Dad, I know you don't believe me. Let's make a bet. How about it?" "Bet on what?" "Let's bet on this comprehensive academic ability test." Ethan's voice was filled with powerful, unquestionable confidence. "If I don't get the top score in the state, you can do whatever you want with me for the rest of my life. If I do get it." He paused, his gaze sweeping over this home that, though old, was full of warmth. "If I get accepted, I hope that from then on you will unconditionally trust and support any decision I make." Richard Johnson's lips twitched. He was shaken silent by his son's unprecedented intensity and couldn't find words for a moment. "And also," Ethan continued, tossing out a second bombshell, "within a year, I promise to get you both into the best seaside villa in our Bin City. The deed will have your names on it." The living room fell into a deathly silence. Richard Johnson and Elizabeth stared at their son as if he were a monster. State top scorer? By a seaside villa within a year? This child is either crazy or has been so badly shocked that his mind is disturbed. "Ethan," Elizabeth's voice was trembling. She reached out, wanting to touch her son's forehead. "You don't scare your mother like this." Just then, urgent knocking suddenly came from outside the door. Immediately after, a clear, tear-tinged female voice came from outside the door. "Uncle, Aunt, open the door. I am Sophia. I'm looking for Ethan. Please let me see him." It would be her. That ghost from the past had actually followed them to their home. Richard Johnson and Elizabeth's faces instantly became incredibly complicated. A cold, blade-like glint flashed in Ethan's eyes. He stood up and walked to the door. He did not open it. Instead, through the door, in a tone devoid of any emotion, as if speaking to a stranger, he said coldly, "Sophia, I'll say it one last time. Get out. Don't show up in my life again. Or else, you'll bear the consequences." Outside the door, Sophia's crying stopped abruptly. She leaned against the cold security door, her whole body trembling, not from fear, but from searing anger and humiliation. In all her life, this was the first time someone had told her to get out. And the one who said it was Ethan The very man who once treated her like a goddess and obeyed her every whim. Why should that be? Why does he have to treat me like this? The enormous sense of letdown gnawed at her heart like a venomous snake. She could understand where things had gone wrong. Clearly, everything had been part of her plan. She chose to confess publicly at the pep rally before the test because she was sure Ethan couldn't refuse. This would satisfy her vanity and, with that favor and status, completely bind Ethan, the promising prospect, to her. She knew very well that with Ethan's grades, admission to an Ivy League school was a sure thing. As for herself, although her grades were good, she was still a bit short of what it would take to get into the best state university locally. Her plan was to make Ethan give up the guaranteed admission for her, accompany her to take the test, and then use Ethan's notes and tutoring to help her get into the state university. When she got to university, she comfortably enjoyed all the halo that Ethan's talent brought her, under the guise of being a couple. As for the future, she had never thought of a real future with Ethan. Her goal was someone like Jason, a true golden son of heaven. Ethan was merely a perfect and convenient stepping stone for her to reach a higher class. But now, this stepping stone she thought she could manipulate had suddenly turned into a smelly, hard obstacle that dared to trip her instead. Ethan, get out here. Explain yourself. Sophia pounded on the door unwillingly, her voice sharp. Did you listen to someone slander? You weren't like this before. Look me in the eye and tell me what's wrong with you. Inside, Richard Johnson and Elizabeth looked at each other helplessly. Ethan, however, acted as if he hadn't heard, walked straight back into his room, and slammed the door. What is going on? Elizabeth fretted, pacing in distress. Richard, maybe we should let her in and clear this up? Richard Johnson wore a sullen expression, puffing on a cigarette, shaking his head. Let him handle it himself. For some reason, although his son's words today sounded like fantasy, he saw an unprecedented determination in Ethan's eyes. Maybe he really should trust him this once? The crying and commotion outside continued, drawing neighbors in the corridor to poke their heads out and gossip. No matter how thick-skinned Sophia was, she couldn't withstand this public, execution-like spectacle. She stomped her foot hard, wiped her tears, and a flash of resentment crossed her eyes. Ethan, just you wait. You think that by rejecting me, you'll be able to have a good life? I'll make you see what happens when you offend me. Sophia. In the room, Ethan put on his headphones, cutting off all the noise from the outside world. He didn't study. Instead, he opened his laptop and logged into an encrypted overseas email account. Relying on his memory, he sent an email to an account with the ID Prometheus. The email was very simple, containing only one sentence. The ghost in North America has awakened. When will the Titan in Europe return to its position? This was the code phrase between the two most essential technical partners in the global business empire he had founded with his own hands in his previous life. Phantom was North America's top AI algorithm engineer, a reclusive Chinese prodigy. Titan was a legend in the European hacker scene, a genius versed in every network offense and defense technique. In his previous life, Ethan spent a full 5 years bringing those two under his command. In this life, he intended to awaken them 10 years earlier. He knew that relying on Bitcoin alone could only complete his initial capital accumulation. To truly build an empire capable of rivaling a century-old family like Jason's, he needed the very best talent. After sending the email, Ethan shut down his computer. He knew the other person wouldn't reply immediately and might even treat the message as spam. But that doesn't matter. He had already planted a seed in the other person's mind. After finishing all that, he pulled a brand new copy of 5 years of tests, 3 years of simulations, still smelling of ink, from the bottom shelf. There was 1 month left until the comprehensive academic ability test. Top score? For someone who had once personally built a technological empire and chatted casually with the world's top elites, steamrolling a high school exam was nothing more than a dull warm-up. Over the next month, Ethan completely withdrew from the world. He stopped going to school, ignored every call, and spent his days doing practice problems at home. The storm at school was fiercer than he had imagined. He became the biggest scumbag and traitor since benching number 1 high school was founded. On the forums, threads about him reached tens of thousands of posts, with all kinds of obscene insults and malicious speculations endlessly popping up. Sophia, meanwhile, perfectly played the victim. She wept every day, her grades plummeting, earning the sympathy of countless people. Her close friends and admirers spontaneously formed an anti-Ethan league, vowing to ruin his reputation after the exams. Ethan paid no heed to any of it. His heart was long and ancient well. These antics, which to him seemed no more than children at play, could not stir even the slightest ripple on the lake of his heart. He was merely waiting for the arrival of the test. That clear bell that announced the end of the old era and the beginning of the new one. A month later, the comprehensive academic ability test arrived on schedule. When Ethan stepped out of the exam hall, he saw Sophia at the school gate, surrounded by a crowd like a proud princess. She saw him too. Her eyes were full of resentment, contempt, and a trace of schadenfreude. She seemed to have already foreseen what kind of unbearably dismal result this man, who had given up on himself because of her, would achieve. Ethan's gaze met hers for a brief second. Then, as if looking at a stranger, he calmly looked away and disappeared into the crowd. When the test results came out, the whole Bin city was shaken. The standard for a perfect score. Bincheng no. One high school's Ethan, with an almost perfect, outrageously high score, took this year's state science top scholar crown. As for Sophia, because her mindset collapsed, she performed poorly and missed the state university admission cutoff by a full 10 points. This result was like the loudest, most invisible slap, striking hard across the faces of everyone who had ever mocked, insulted, or looked down on Ethan. It hurt like fire. The title of top scorer exploded like a deep water bomb, stirring up a tidal wave across benching number 1 high school and the entire education circle of benching. The threshold of the Ethan household was almost worn through by foot traffic. Admissions officers from Ivy League schools, offering the most generous conditions, vied to throw out olive branches. Reporters from major media, shouldering long lenses and heavy cameras, blocked the entrance, desperate to interview this most low-key top scorer in history. Richard Johnson and Elizabeth felt like they were dreaming. One moment their son was the ungrateful black sheep the neighbors talked about. The next he was the envied perfect child everyone admired. The whiplash of emotions left them dizzy and at a loss. Richard, I'm not dreaming, am I? Elizabeth held the printed, crimson report card, her hands trembling. Pinch me, Al. It's real. My son is the top scorer. Richard Johnson grinned like a child, laughter in his mouth and tears welling at the corners of his eyes. He remembered the bet his son had made in front of him a month ago. Now he believed it. He looked at his son, sitting calmly at the desk, waiting for the call from the Ivy League admissions office, his eyes full of guilt, pride, and an unprecedented, strange reverence. He realized that he had never really understood this son. Mr. Johnson, sorry, I haven't made up my mind yet. Ethan's tone was polite but distant. Thank you for your kindness. I will give it serious consideration. He hung up the phone from Ivy League School A, and then immediately declined the invitation from Ivy League School B. Ethan, what are you doing? Richard Johnson became anxious. Those are Ivy League schools. People fight tooth and nail to get in. How can you be so choosy? Dad. Ethan turned around, looked at him, and said calmly, the Ivy League is not my goal. Then where do you want to go? High City Institute of Technology. This answer stunned Richard Johnson and Elizabeth once again. Why? Elizabeth asked, puzzled. High City Institute of Technology is also a top university, but compared to the Ivies, it's still. Because the future is in Highshire. Ethan's gaze seemed to pierce time and see the sweeping waves of finance and technology over the next decade. That's where the battlefield best suited to me is. An even more important reason was that, in his previous life, Sophia and Jason were both in Jingshire. He no longer wanted to breathe the same air as those filthy people and things. He wanted to build his own empire in a brand new place where no one knew him. Looking at his son's unquestioning gaze, Richard Johnson opened his mouth, but in the end swallowed his words of persuasion. He remembered the bet he had lost. From today on, he would unconditionally believe every decision his son made. At that moment, Ethan's phone rang. It's an unfamiliar number. He answered it. "Hello, is this Ethan?" On the other end of the line came a somewhat timid, young male voice. "This is he. Who are you?" I am Joe. Do you remember me? We were high school classmates. I sat behind you." Joe. In Ethan's mind, a face wearing black-rimmed glasses, always looking down and taciturn, quickly came to mind. Of course he remembered. Joe, his college roommate in his previous life, was also an overlooked, true programming prodigy. In his previous life, because of poverty and an introverted personality, Joe was subjected to exclusion and bullying throughout college. Ultimately, in his junior year, suffering from severe depression, he leapt from the dormitory roof and ended his young life. Only after his death did Ethan discover, on the computer Joe left behind, the prototypes of those AI algorithms he had written, algorithms powerful enough to shock the entire world. That was an everlasting pain and regret in Ethan's heart. This time, he would never let the tragedy repeat. "I remember." Ethan's voice unconsciously softened a little. "What did you call me for?" Joe, on the other end of the line, seemingly not expecting Ethan to still remember him, was so excited he stammered. I just wanted to congratulate you on becoming the top scorer. So amazing. Thanks." Ethan smiled. "How about you? How did you do on the exam?" I'm Euphine. "I got a good score, so I should be able to get into the computer science department at HeartSpark Institute of Technology." Joe's voice carried a trace of insecurity and uncertainty. "Really? What a coincidence." Ethan's tone was filled with just the right amount of pleasant surprise. "I also applied to the computer science department at HeartSpark Institute of Technology. Looks like we might become college roommates." "Ray, really?" Joe's voice instantly rose by 8 tones, full of incredulous joy. For someone like him, who had almost no friends during his 3 years of high school, becoming classmates, even roommates, with the top scorer was something he never dared to imagine. "Of course it's true." Ethan's tone carried a reassuring strength. "Joe, you're a genius. You just don't know it yet. Come to university with me. Stick with me. I promise. Within 4 years, your name will be ringing through the entire internet industry." To anyone else, those words would sound like a fairy tale. But coming from someone called a state top scholar, they carried a convincing, almost magical power. On the other end of the line, Joe was silent for a long time. Ethan could hear his breathing, roughened by excitement. After a long while, in a nearly choked, vowel-like tone, he said heavily, "Okay." Ethan laughed. He knew that in his future empire, the first loyal knight had taken his place. After hanging up, Ethan opened that overseas trading website. The price of Bitcoin had quietly climbed to $12. The numbers in his account had nearly tripled. Everything was unfolding exactly along the path he remembered, not a fraction out of place. At that moment, Sophia, far away in another city, had shut herself in her room and was frantically tearing up her test scores. She couldn't make sense of it. She didn't understand why this was happening. The man she had abandoned, the one she thought would be ruined forever, had somehow risen to the heavens in a way she could only look up to, dazzling beyond compare. And she herself had fallen from the heights, crashing down into the mud. The immense humiliation and unwillingness twisted her beautiful face into something contorted and grotesque. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had originally thought she wouldn't contact until college. "Hello, is this Senior Jason?" Her voice turned pitiable again, filled with just the right amount of grievance and fragility. "I'm Sophia, from benching number 1 high school. Yes, I'm the one who presented flowers to you at your talk the last time. I've run into some trouble. I'm being bullied. His name is Ethan." A conspiracy against Ethan, originating from higher dimension, was quietly taking shape. But they all didn't know that what they were about to face was a demon from 10 years in the future who controlled every script. The seaside city in September still held the lingering warmth of summer. On the campus of HeartSpark Institute of Technology, the plane trees cast dappled shadows. Everywhere were freshmen pulling suitcases, their faces radiating youth and hope. Ethan and Joe walked side by side through the crowd. Ethan wore a simple white t-shirt and jeans, but his composure, far beyond his years, made him stand out. Joe, meanwhile, still looked timid, trailing behind Ethan, curiously and nervously taking in this brand new world. Top scorer. It's Ethan. What the heck? He looks more energetic in person than in the photo. Who's that next to him? Why does he look like such a bookworm? As one of this year's most famous state top scorers, Ethan's enrollment naturally caused quite a stir. Many people recognized him and cast curious, probing glances. Ethan was long accustomed to these things, his expression calm and indifferent. Joe, on the other hand, felt so many eyes on him that his palms were sweating. He buried his head even lower. Chin up, chest out. Ethan patted his shoulder and said lightly, "From today on, you're not a bookworm, you're a genius. You need to get used to being admired." Joe was stunned for a moment, then nodded heavily and forced himself to straighten his slightly hunched back. The two of them arrived at the computer science dormitory building. After the dorm supervisor, Aunt, checked their information, she handed them a key. "Room 302. You two are the first ones here." They opened the door and were greeted by sunlight and a faint smell of soap. The dorm was a standard 4-person room, bunks with desks underneath, clean and tidy. Just as the two were putting their things away, the dormitory door was pushed open. A boy wearing trendy brand clothes with his hair dyed ash blonde and a tall, muscular athlete swaggered in. "Yo, isn't this the top scorer?" The ash blonde boy, named Robert, sneered when he saw Ethan. "I've heard so much about you." The athlete, named John, heftily tossed his luggage to the ground and cast hostile looks over Ethan and Joe. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly. He remembered those two. In a last life, they had been his and Joe's roommates. Robert was a lazy, rich, second-generation heir, and John was his follower. In the dorm, they often excluded and bullied introverted Joe over all sorts of trivial things. Much of Joe's depression was thanks to them. Unexpectedly, in this life, they ended up assigned to the same dorm again. They really were persistent like a bad ghost. From now on, we're brothers. I'm Robert, and this is John. Robert, ever familiar, reached out and tried to clap Ethan on the shoulder. Ethan nonchalantly stepped aside and said coolly, "Hello." Robert's hand froze midair, his expression awkward. Then a flash of displeasure crossed his face. He had been planning to cozy up to the top student to maybe mooch off homework later, and hadn't expected the other to be so disrespectful. His gaze turned to the silent Joe beside him, and his tone instantly turned flippant. "Hey, bookworm, what's your name? Also in the computer science department? You don't look like it." Joe felt completely uncomfortable under his stare and stammered, My name is Joe." "Joe," Robert snorted. "All right then, you'll be in charge of cleaning our dorm from now on. And when we play games, you'd better wear headphones so you don't bother us. Got it?" Those words were laced with unabashed bullying. In his previous life, Joe endured like that silently for 4 years. But this time, before Joe could speak, Ethan's cold voice sounded. "Who were you just talking to?" Robert froze for a moment, turned his head, and saw Ethan looking at him coldly. That look was like being stared at by something lifeless, making him shiver for no reason. I was talking to him. What's wrong?" Robert said, bracing his neck. "He's my brother." Ethan's tone was very calm, but each word fell like a block of ice, smashing into the ground. "My people, you think you can order them around?" The air in the entire dormitory instantly dropped to freezing point. Neither Robert nor John had expected that this seemingly gentle, scholarly top scorer would be so domineering. What did you say?" John, the jock with a hot temper, was ready to blow up on the spot. clenching his fist to step forward. "What? Want to make a move?" Ethan's gaze turned toward him. In that instant, John felt as if he were being stared down by a prehistoric beast. There was no emotion in Ethan's eyes, only a pure, life-disregarding coldness. It was the kind of look only someone who had crawled out a mountain of corpses and blood could have. John's small burst of student bravado was instantly extinguished. He even had the illusion that if he took one more step forward, the other would, without hesitation, snap his neck. He took a step back, trying to look fierce but inwardly timid, muttering, Who wants to start something?" Robert was also the sort to pick on the weak and fear the strong. Seeing John back down, he immediately lost his nerve too. He gave a couple of forced laughs and joked, just kidding, top scholar, don't take it to heart. We're all roommates. We'll be helping each other from now on." Ethan ignored them and instead turned to Joe. "Come on, I'll take you somewhere." With that, he led the still-dazed Joe out of the dormitory. Only Robert and John were left, staring at each other, their faces turning pale and then flushed. They knew that this dorm 302 would probably not be an easy place to stay anymore. At this moment, in another girls' dormitory building at HeartSpark Institute of Technology, Sophia was looking at a message on her phone, a cold smile curling at the corner of her mouth. In the end, she still didn't get into HeartSpark Institute of Technology and went to an ordinary state college. But that no longer mattered, because she had already hooked up with Jason's connection. The message was from Jason. It was simple. "I've taken care of him. He's in his dorm. Don't worry. He won't have an easy 4 years in college." A gleeful light glittered in Sophia's eyes. "Ethan, do you think that by becoming the top scorer you can get rid of me? You're way too naive. I'll make you understand. Offend me. And even if you flee to the ends of the earth, I'll make your life worse than death." She still doesn't know that the pillars she prides herself on and the supposedly clever tactics she uses are nothing more than a childish, insignificant joke in Ethan's eyes. A true, dimensionality-reducing storm is quietly brewing. Ethan brought Joe and didn't wander around the campus. Instead, they took a taxi straight to the financial district. When Joe stood under the iconic tower and looked up at those skyscrapers piercing the clouds, he was completely stunned. In his life, he had never been to such a world-class financial center. He felt like an ant that had wandered into the land of giants. "Hey, Ethan, why are we here?" Joe asked nervously. "To rent an office." Ethan's tone was as flat as if he were saying, "Let's go to the cafeteria for a meal." Rent an office? Joe's eyes went wide as copper bells. Ethan didn't offer further explanation. He simply led him into the office tower of the Global Financial Center. Half an hour later, the two of them were standing in an office on a high floor with an unbeatable 270-degree sea view. The office wasn't large, about 100 square meters, but it was luxuriously decorated with an expansive view. "Sir, the annual rent here is $3 million US, paid monthly in arrears. Are you sure you want to rent?" The property manager in professional attire wore a practiced smile, but her eyes betrayed a hint of barely concealed doubt. She simply couldn't reconcile these two young men, who looked like poor students, with tenants of such a top-tier office building. Joe was so nervous he could barely breathe. $3 million. He had never seen that much money in his life. Ethan, however, seemed not to notice the property manager's look. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a black bank card. Swiped the card. This card was the first chunk of Bitcoin he had cashed out, used to get an anonymous black card from a Swiss bank. Don't say $3 million. Even 30 million would have been swiped without a flinch. The moment the POS machine spit out the receipt, the property manager's look toward Ethan changed completely. Suspicion turned to shock, and finally to extreme deference and obsequiousness. "All right, Mr. Johnson, we'll prepare the contract for you right away. May I ask the name of your company? We can make the nameplate for you." The Epic of Tomorrow, Ethan Sedendondud. This name was the name of the tech empire he founded in his previous life. In this life, he would make it resound across the world 10 years earlier. Stepping out of the Global Financial Center, Joe was still dazed, feeling like he was dreaming. Ethan, where, where did you get so much money? He finally couldn't hold back the question in his heart. Investments, made a bit of money. Ethan replied casually. He couldn't explain about Bitcoin. That thing was still too advanced for people now. Although Joe still found it unbelievable. Out of trust in Ethan, he didn't press further. Ethan, so you rented this office. Are you going to start a company? That's right. Ethan nodded. I've already registered the company. It's called Future Era. From today on, you're the Chief Technology Officer, the CTO. CTO. Joe felt as if his brain had been struck by a massive bomb again. I can't do it. He hurriedly waved his hand, his face flushing. I don't know anything. If I say you can do it, then you can do it. Ethan cut him off, staring at him intently. Let me show you something. He took Joe to a nearby cafe and opened the laptop he always carried with him. He didn't open any business plan. Instead, he opened a blank code editor. Then his fingers began to fly across the keyboard. Lines of futuristic, sleek, and efficient code that Joe had never seen before poured down the screen like a waterfall. That wasn't writing code, it was creating art. Joe was completely stunned. He had always thought himself somewhat talented at programming. But compared to what Ethan was showing now, his efforts were nothing more than kindergarten-level scribbles. What Ethan had written was a brand new, neural network-based recommendation algorithm. This algorithm is precisely the core technology on which all internet giants will rely to survive in the coming decade. 10 minutes later, Ethan stopped. He turned his laptop toward Joe and said, "Do you understand it?" Joe's forehead was beaded with fine sweat. He stared fixedly at the code on the screen, his eyes full of shock, obsession, and a rivalrous, feverish excitement. This is unbelievable. His voice was trembling. This kind of algorithmic architecture, it's simply a masterpiece of God. It can change the world. No, it's only the beginning. A confident smile curved at Ethan's mouth. And we're the ones who are about to change the world. Joe, now, do you still think you can't do it? Joe suddenly looked up and stared at Ethan. The inferiority and timidity in his eyes had been swept away. In their place burned a flame called dream. I can do it, he said heavily. Ethan nodded with satisfaction. He knew that a sleeping lion had been completely awakened by him. Just as the two of them were planning their future, Ethan's phone suddenly received a push notification from the school forum. The headline read, "Bombshell. Computer science freshman Ethan suspected of plagiarizing foreign open source code while participating in the National College Programming Contest." Attached to the post was a screenshot of the algorithm code Ethan had previously shown Joe, and another piece of code from a well-known foreign code hosting platform with an extremely similar structure. The poster used an anonymous ID, but even with his toes, Ethan knew who had done it. Sophia, and the one behind her, Jason. They had finally started using these unbecoming methods to attack him. Ethan, this what's going on? Joe had seen the post too and immediately grew anxious. This is slander. Your algorithm is 100 times better than that so-called open source code. Don't worry. Ethan's face showed no anger. Instead, a hint of amusement played across it. If they want to play, then we'll play with them on a bigger scale. He took out his phone and dialed a number. Hello, is this the chair of the computer science department at HeartSpark Institute of Technology, Professor? I'm a freshman this year, Ethan. Yes, the top scholar. I have a small idea about artificial intelligence and the future that I'd like to discuss with you in person. I wonder if you have time now. The professor is a towering figure in the domestic field of computer science and the head of the computer science department at HeartSpark Institute of Technology. He is old-fashioned and meticulous in his scholarship. What he despises most in life is fraud and academic misconduct. When he saw the forum post about top scholar Ethan suspected of plagiarism, he was so angry he nearly threw the thermos in his hand. He had pinned high hopes on this year's state top scholar. He had thought Ethan would bring a breath of fresh air to the computer science department at HeartSpark Institute of Technology, but it turned out to be a shortcut-taking, embellished dud. Find out immediately. Where is this Ethan right now? The professor shouted into the phone. Just then, the office landline rang. Hello, Professor. I'm a freshman this year, Ethan. Hearing that name, the professor's anger shot up in an instant. You little brat, you actually dared to come to me on a platter. You still have the nerve to call me, the professor said coldly, restraining his temper. How do you plan to explain what happened on the forum? Explain. The voice on the other end of the phone was calm, without a ripple. Professor, I think you may have misunderstood. I'm not calling to explain. I'm calling to show you something. Something that will overturn your current understanding of algorithms. Arrogant. The professor laughed angrily. Young man, I've met more geniuses than the rice you've eaten. Save your attention-seeking theatrics for someone else when you're in front of me. Whether it's theatrics or not, you'll know once you see it with your own eyes. Ethan's tone remained terrifyingly confident. I'm right below your office. Give me 10 minutes. If I can't make you change your mind, I'll withdraw from school immediately and submit to whatever punishment you see fit. Withdraw immediately. Professor was stunned by Ethan's do-or-die momentum. He hesitated for a moment, then finally forced out 2 words through his teeth. Come up. He wanted to see what tricks this unbearably arrogant top scorer could possibly pull off. 10 minutes later, Ethan and Joe were standing in Professor's office. Speak. What do you want to show me? Professor leaned back in his chair, arms folded, looking at Ethan with a scrutinizing expression. Ethan said nothing. He simply connected his laptop to the office projector. On the screen, there was not code nor a PowerPoint, but an extremely simple web page with only a search box and a few buttons. What is this? Professor frowned. A prototype of a search engine, Ethan said lightly. A search engine? Professor snorted. Google and Bing have already perfected that. You're just a student, and you want to reinvent the wheel. What they built is information retrieval based on keyword matching. A mysterious smile tugged at Ethan's mouth. What I'm building is based on semantic understanding, artificial intelligence. Having said that, he typed a sentence into the search box. Find me a paper on the application of quantum entanglement in faster-than-light communication that presents the most novel viewpoints yet remains unaccepted by mainstream academia, and summarize its core arguments and potential controversies in a Chinese abstract of no more than 300 characters. Seeing this search request, Professor froze. This was no longer a search. It was issuing a work order to a top-tier research assistant. No existing search engine could possibly accomplish such a task. However, the next moment, what happened on the screen completely overturned his decades of academic understanding. The crude page, after stuttering for less than half a second, precisely displayed on the screen a link to an unpublished paper from MIT's internal forum. Immediately below that paper, a logically clear, fluently written Chinese abstract with exceptionally precise distilled arguments was automatically generated. At the end of the abstract, 3 major potential academic points of contention for the paper were listed, each hitting the mark and cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Professor's mouth slowly opened. His expression shifted from disdain to shock, and finally to a horror, as if he'd seen a ghost. He abruptly stood up from his chair, rushed to the screen, put on his reading glasses, and read that abstract word by word. The more he read, the faster his heart beat. The more he read, the colder the sweat ran down his back. As the top expert in this field, he knew better than anyone what kind of terrifying computational power and how advanced algorithmic logic would be required to accomplish the task just now. This is simply beyond the level of current technology. This is basically technology from the future. Is this you're doing? Professor turned his head and looked at Ethan with a trembling voice. In his eyes, there was no longer a trace of contempt, only endless shock and fervor. To be precise, it was completed by me and my CTO, Joe, Ethan said, pointing to Joe beside him, who was equally stunned. Joe quickly waved his hand. He knew he had only lent a hand. The core algorithm was entirely Ethan's work. Professor ignored Joe's modesty. His gaze was fixed tightly on Ethan, as if looking at a rare treasure. Plagiarism? What a joke. He suddenly slapped his thigh, his face flushed with excitement. Someone who possesses this kind of thing needs to copy others' garbage code? That's the greatest insult to genius. He immediately picked up the phone and called the school's publicity department and the network management center. Delete that post on the forum for me right now. Immediately. At once. Also, issue a clarification announcement. Say that after strict evaluation by the department's expert panel, Ethan's algorithm is a world-class, groundbreaking, original achievement. Any slander against him, HeartSpark Institute of Technology will pursue to the end. After hanging up, Professor, like a child who'd gotten a beloved toy, rubbed his hands and smiled ingratiatingly at Ethan. Johnson, you see, your artificial intelligence, do you have any more in-depth research? We could collaborate. The school will provide you with the best labs, the best equipment, people if you need them, money if you need it. Watching Professor's 180-degree change of attitude, Joe felt his worldview being refreshed once again. So it turned out that true power really can crush all plots and schemes. Ethan smiled and said, Professor, cooperation is of course possible. However, I have one small condition. Don't say one. Make it 100. I hope the school can support my future epic company and jointly establish an AI industry university research base with a computer science department. We'll provide the core technology and commercialization direction, and the school will provide talent and academic support. Ethan revealed his true intention. What he wanted was more than just a professor's backing. He wanted to tie the great ship of Shanghai Institute of Technology to his future empire, providing a continuous supply of the very best talent. No problem. Absolutely no problem. The professor agreed without a second thought. He knew that today he might have witnessed the beginning of a new era with his own eyes, and the person who would usher in that era stood right before him. At that moment, Sophia, far away at another university, was smugly refreshing the forum of HeartSpark Polytechnic, waiting to watch Ethan's spectacular downfall. What she got instead was a sternly worded official announcement that elevated Ethan to a pedestal, and a system notice informing her that her post had been deleted and her ID permanently banned. The smile on her face froze instantly. A sinister, bone-deep chill shot up from the soles of her feet to the crown of her head. For the first time, she realized that things seemed to have completely slipped out of her control. The Ethan she thought she could manipulate at will was turning into someone she could no longer understand, a terrifying presence. Top scholar Ethan teams up with HeartSpark Institute of Technology to jointly establish an artificial intelligence base. A prodigy who single-handedly ushered in a new era of AI. Academic titan Professor hailed. He is a gift from the future. The next day, with the endorsement of the HeartSpark Institute of Technology's official channels and Professor himself, Ethan leaped out of the mire of plagiarism and was promptly elevated to an altar. The entire HeartSpark Institute of Technology and even the whole university scene in HeartSpark was shaken. A freshman, barely a week into school, had already reached a strategic-level partnership with the university. Such a thing had never been heard of. In dorm 302, Robert and John looked at the news on their phones, then at Ethan, who was sitting at the desk calmly reading, and felt like they were looking at an alien. They finally understood what kind of terrifying existence they had tried to bully before. From that day on, they became even quieter than quail in the dorm. Not only did they dare not boss Joe around, they didn't even dare speak loudly, for fear of upsetting this great master. Joe, meanwhile, became the most sought-after figure in the entire computer science department. As the CTO of Future Era and Ethan's chosen brother, countless people wanted to use him to get close to Ethan. Even the department beauty who had previously snubbed him began actively flattering him. For the first time, Joe experienced what it meant for one person's success to lift everyone around them. But he didn't become arrogant because of it. Instead, he devoted even more time to researching that artificial intelligence algorithm. He knew that all of this was given to him by Ethan. The only thing he could do was to keep improving himself and not disappoint the favor he had been shown. The company's development also officially entered the fast lane. With the endorsement and talent support of HeartSpark University of Technology, Future Epic soon launched its first product, the Apocalypse Intelligent Search Engine. Thanks to a disruptive user experience far surpassing Google and Bing, it detonated across the entire internet as soon as it went live. Users were astonished to find that this was no longer a simple search tool, but an all-knowing, all-powerful personal intelligent assistant. The daily active users of Apocalypse displayed viral growth. 1 month later, it surpassed 1 million. 3 months later, it surpassed 10 million. 6 months later, it surpassed 100 million. Future Era became 2011's biggest dark horse in the internet industry, its valuation rocketing like a rocket, with countless top investment firms waving checks, all wanting a piece of the pie. But Ethan refused all the investments. He didn't need them, because his real gold mine, Bitcoin, had ushered in the most insane bull market since its creation. The price, from under $5 when he bought in, rocketed past $100, $200, and finally only barely stopped near $300. At the peak, Ethan calmly and in batches closed out his long positions, 20 times leveraged contracts, worth nearly $10 million. When the final trade was completed, the figure in his Swiss bank account had become a terrifying astronomical number that would make any country take notice. Billions. US dollars. An 18-year-old boy, in less than a year, built something from nothing and created a multi-billion-dollar legend. If this got out, it would be enough to shock the world. But Ethan remained calm, as if nothing had happened. He just made a phone call to his parents, who lived far away in Bin City. "Dad, Mom, do you remember the bet I made with you last year? I bought you a top-floor duplex with the best sea view in Seaside City, fully renovated, ready to move in with your bags. The property deed is in your names. Tomorrow, I'll send someone to pick you up." On the other end of the line, there was a long, death-like silence. And then my old father suppressed, overwhelming breaths, heavy with excitement and joy. Meanwhile, in Jing City, in a heavily guarded manner, a young man in a bespoke suit was staring sullenly at an investigative report handed to him by a subordinate about Future Epic and Ethan. He was Jason, backed by Heischer Institute of Technology, Artificial Intelligence, a valuation of $10 billion in 6 months. A cold, disdainful curve lifted the corner of Jason's mouth. "Interesting." He tapped the table lightly. In his eyes flickered the cruel excitement of a hunter watching his prey grow. "I thought he was just a somewhat clever country bumpkin. I didn't expect he'd actually manage to make something of himself." "Mr. Jason, so shall we?" his subordinate asked cautiously at his side. "Not in a hurry." Jason waved his hand, picked up a costly glass of red wine, and swirled it gently. "Let him fly a little longer. The higher he flies, the harder he'll fall, won't he? Go, prop up that security software company we invested in, 360 Security. Inject another $1 billion into them and have them build a search engine. I want to see whether his artificial intelligence is more impressive or whether my capital is more impressive." Also, a trace of amusement flashed in Jason's eyes. "How is my fiancée, Sophia, doing lately?" Reporting to Mr. Jason, "Miss Sophia, she's been asking about Ethan's news recently, and it seems she still hasn't given up on him." "Is that so?" Jason smiled, his smile full of meaning. "Very good. Casually leaked to her the news that Ethan is now worth tens of billions of dollars. I like watching drama, especially when it's dog-eat-dog." A true dimensionality-reducing strike from a capital tycoon was about to begin. Jason thought he was the lofty hunter who controlled everything. He didn't know that the prey he saw flying higher and higher was actually a prehistoric giant dragon from the abyss that had long ago opened its bloodthirsty jaws. Ethan, worth tens of billions of dollars. When Sophia accidentally heard this news from Jason's assistant, she was struck as if by lightning. The coffee cup in her hand fell to the ground with a clatter and shattered to pieces. $10 billion? How is this possible? How long has it been? Less than a year. How could a poor student possibly earn an amount of money that would last 100 lifetimes in under a year? Her first reaction was that it was fake, that Jason was testing her. But when she saw the flood of online news about future epic and apocalypse search, and those financial analysts' conservative estimates of Ethan's net worth, she had to believe that this utterly absurd piece of news was true. A wave of remorse and jealousy 100 times stronger than when Ethan publicly rejected her before. So intense it was like sulfuric acid, instantly corroded her insides. That should have been hers. If back then she hadn't chosen to betray him, if she were still with Ethan now, then standing by his side, enjoying all this honor and wealth, would be her, Sophia, she would have become the wife of a billionaire, the wealthy matron everyone envied and coveted. Instead of like now, at an ordinary state college, sustaining her pitiful vanity with a vague title of Jason's fiancée. No, I can't just let it go. A crazed fire ignited in Sophia's eyes. She believed Ethan must still love her. He treated me that way before must have been because love turned to hate. He wanted to use that method to get my attention. Yes, it must be that. As long as I take the initiative, humble myself a bit, and beg him to get back together. Given how obsessed he is with me, he'll definitely change his mind. Once this absurd thought took root, it spread like rampant weeds and instantly filled her entire brain. She began frantically calling Ethan and sending messages. Ethan, I know I was wrong. Can we start over? I know you still love me. You're doing all this to prove it to me, aren't you? I miss you so much. Let's see each other. Please, I'm begging you. Yet none of the messages ever reached him. They vanished without a trace. Ethan had long since blocked all of her contact methods. Sophia was unwilling to accept defeat. She bought a plane ticket to Haishur and went to the building of the Future Era Company. But she couldn't even get through the company's front door. The receptionist, looking at this seemingly deranged woman, immediately called security. Miss, if you keep making a scene here, we'll call the police. Sophia was dragged out of the lobby of the Global Financial Center by two tall security guards, as if she were a dead dog. The disdainful and mocking looks from the people around pierced her like needles, leaving her completely exposed and wounded. The overwhelming shame made her lose all reason. She stood outside the building and dialed Jason's number, her voice full of a venomous sob. Jason, that Ethan, he's gone too far. He humiliated me in front of everyone. You have to help me get revenge. On the other end of the line, Jason's voice retained that same elegant, languid tone. Oh, really? Baby, don't cry. I've told you before, dealing with these country bumpkins can't be done with brains alone. Sometimes more direct, physical methods are more effective. Don't worry, I've prepared a big gift for you. Meanwhile, Ethan was in his office receiving an unexpected visitor. The founder of 360 Security, Mr. Zhou. This magnate, famed in the future internet world as the red-clad cannon, was now sitting opposite Ethan, his face wearing that trademark-friendly yet slightly sly smile. Mr. Johnson, truly accomplished at a young age. Mr. Zhou's tone was full of admiration. Your apocalypse search has left us old-timers dumbfounded. The younger generation is formidable, truly formidable. Mr. Zhou, you flatter me. Ethan personally poured him a cup of tea, his expression calm. You're not here today just to praise me, are you? Ha ha. Talking to a smart person is effortless. Mr. Zhou laughed heartily. That's right. I'm here today to discuss a partnership with you. We at 360 Security want to take a strategic stake in Wei Liajian. You name the price. As long as we can afford it, we won't haggle. Additionally, we can open all of 360 Security's traffic channels to divert users to Tenchi. The only condition is that we become the exclusive domestic agent for Tenchi. So, this condition was, to say the least, generous. For any startup, gaining traffic support from a giant like 360 Security was tantamount to boarding a rocket. But Ethan just smiled. Mr. Zhou, I appreciate your kindness. However, Future Era doesn't lack money now, nor will it lack traffic in the future. So, as for cooperation, I think it's best to pass. Mr. Zhou's smile on his face stiffened slightly. He hadn't expected Ethan to refuse so decisively. "Mr. Johnson, won't you reconsider?" His tone grew heavy. "You must understand, today's internet industry isn't something you can win with technology alone. Without traffic, without capital, you won't get far. Moreover," he shifted his tone, speaking insinuatingly, "I've heard the Vanderbilt family in Jing City is also very interested in your slice of the pie. Do you really think, with just you alone, you can withstand the pressure from the Vanderbilt family?" Those words already carried a hint of threat. Ethan knew that standing behind Mr. Zhou was Jason. This was a challenge. Ethan put down his teacup, leaned back in the executive chair, looked at Mr. Zhou, and suddenly laughed. "Mr. Zhou, do you know why a lion is afraid of a pack of wolves?" Mr. Zhou was taken aback, not understanding why he asked that suddenly. Before he could answer, Ethan went on without waiting for a reply. "Because although it can bite and kill a few wolves, it will eventually be worn out." "But what if this lion could fly?" In Ethan's eyes flashed a kind of divine light that Mr. Zhou simply couldn't understand. When dimensions differ, the so-called pack of wolves are nothing but a group of laughable ants on the ground. "Mr. Zhou, did you understand what I said?" Mr. Zhou's heart dropped sharply. For the first time, from a young man, he felt a nearly terrifying, completely uncontrollable sense of oppression. He knew the negotiation had broken down. A war to the death was about to begin. He stood up, took one last long look at Ethan, and said in a low voice, "Young man, take care of yourself." Having said that, he turned and left. Just as Mr. Zhou stepped out of the office, Ethan's phone suddenly began to sound an urgent alarm. It was the alert from the program he had set up specifically to monitor Zhou's vital signs. On the screen, the curve representing Zhou's heart rate was plummeting. Ethan's expression darkened instantly. He dialed Zhou's number, but there was no answer on the other end. He immediately opened his laptop and hacked into the campus surveillance system of Heisher University of Technology. Soon, he found Zhou's figure in a secluded alley near the school. On the surveillance footage, Zhou was being cornered against the wall by a few rough-looking young men. One of them was holding a baseball bat and brought it down hard on the back of Zhou's head. Zhou collapsed with a cry, blood instantly staining the ground. Ethan's pupils suddenly contracted into the most dangerous pinprick. A towering, icy, murderous intent, like a tangible cold current, swept through the entire office in an instant. "Jason, Sophia, you guys, you're looking for death." Outside the hospital emergency room, a harsh red light glowed. Ethan sat quietly on the bench in the corridor, still wearing that expensive bespoke suit, but at this moment his expression was colder than the color of the suit. Behind him stood Professor and several department leaders, each with a sullen face, not daring to make a sound. They all knew that the person being resuscitated inside was not just Ethan's roommate, but also the CTO of Future Era and the core figure of the entire artificial intelligence-based project. If anything happened to him on the turf of Heisher Institute of Technology, no one could bear the responsibility. "Investigate. Find them." Professor lowered his voice and roared into the phone. "An attack in broad daylight near the school. Dig up those scumbags' ancestors for me." An hour later, the door to the resuscitation room opened. The doctor took off his mask, his face showing a trace of fatigue. "The patient is out of life-threatening danger. Fortunately, that blow only caused a severe concussion and intracranial bleeding. It didn't hit any vital areas. However, hospitalization for observation is necessary for a while." Hearing this result, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Ethan stood up, walked to the doctor, and bowed deeply. "Thank you." Then he turned around and said to the professor, "Professor, I'll handle what comes next myself. You and the school don't need to intervene anymore." His voice was calm, without a single ripple. But from beneath that calm, the professor felt a terrifying storm about to break aura that could make anyone's blood run cold. "Ethan, don't do anything rash," the professor said with some concern. "We live in a society governed by law. Everything should be left to the police." "Rule of law?" A chilling curve tugged at Ethan's mouth. "Professor, do you think that for some people who sit so high above us, law really exists? Since they've chosen to communicate with me in the most primitive, most brutal way, then I'll reply to them in the only language they can understand, and make it a response they will never forget." After saying that, he ignored everyone and walked straight toward the elevator. That night, 3 videos suddenly spread across the internet like a virus. The first video was the full surveillance footage of Joe being beaten in the alley. The image was clear. The attackers' faces were fully visible. The second video was a secretly recorded clip of those attackers making a transaction with a man in a nightclub. In the video, the man hands him a thick wad of cash and explicitly instructs them to teach that nerd from HeartSpark Institute a lesson: just break one of his hands. And the man giving the orders, after being doxxed by netizens, was confirmed to be Jason's distant cousin in Jingshire, a notoriously spoiled playboy. The third video was a phone recording. On the recording, it was a call between Sophia and Jason. Sophia cried as she recounted being humiliated by Ethan, and Jason comforted her in a doting tone, explicitly saying he would get someone to help you get even. These 3 videos, like 3 heavy bombs, instantly detonated public opinion across the entire internet. Oh my God, hiring someone to injure people? And from the Vanderbilt family? That Sophia is so vicious, right? Just because she was rejected, she wants to ruin someone. My heart goes out to that beaten top student. This is simply an undeserved calamity. Boycott the Vanderbilt family. Boycott this lawless, privileged class. A torrent of public opinion, with unprecedented ferocity, surged toward the Vanderbilt family and Sophia. For the first time, Jason felt what it meant to be unable to defend oneself against 100 accusations. He mobilized all his public relations resources, trying to delete posts and suppress the trending topics. But it was no use. Those videos were like a hydra that couldn't be killed. Just as one was removed here, several others would spread even faster across more platforms. He knew there was an invisible hand behind it all, manipulating everything. A single, technical hand he could not possibly resist. The Vanderbilt family's stock price plummeted in response. Countless partners called to demand termination of their collaborations. This century-old commercial dynasty showed signs of collapse for the first time, and Sophia was utterly ruined and disgraced. She had become synonymous with vicious and snake-hearted. The school expelled her. Her family and friends all cut ties with her. When she walked down the street, people recognized her and spat at her in public. She went from being the admired goddess to the scorned rat everyone wanted to beat. She hid in her rented room, watching the flood of online abuse directed at her, her mind completely collapsing. She didn't understand why this had happened. She only wanted to teach Ethan a lesson, only wanted to take back what rightfully belonged to her. Why did it end like this in the end? She frantically called Jason, but at the other end of the line, there was always only a cold, busy signal. She had been abandoned, like a dirty, worthless piece of trash. HeartSpark, in the penthouse duplex of the top-tier Seaview apartment. Ethan stood before the huge, floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the bay's glittering night view, gently swirling a glass of 1982 Lafite in his hand. Behind him, on the computer screen, Vanderbilt family stock displayed a plunging green K-line chart. Joe's wound was no longer serious, and he had already collected the first bit of interest for his brother. He knew Jason would not stop there. A starving wolf driven to the brink would launch the craziest counterattack. But Ethan had already prepared one final feast for him, a grand funeral that buried him along with his decaying family. He took out his phone and dialed the number from Europe, codenamed Titan. "Hello, Titan. It's me, Ghost. I need you to help me hack into the internal system of a Swiss bank. I want a complete set of evidence on all overseas asset transfers and money laundering by the Vanderbilt family over the past 20 years. The Vanderbilt family's counterattack came faster and more crazily than Ethan had anticipated. Under the dual pressure of public opinion and a stock price collapse, Jason tore off his elegant disguise completely, revealing the most ruthless and scrupulous face of capital. He began to marshal every resource to besiege future era. First came an all-out declaration of war by 360 Security. At Jason's direction, Mr. Zhou announced that 360 Security would label Apocalypse Search as a malicious plugin, subjecting it to comprehensive blocking and forced uninstallation. In an instant, countless users discovered that Apocalypse on their computers had vanished overnight. Next came the all-encompassing, systematic smearing. Countless paid commenters and marketing accounts began posting on every major platform, dirt, claiming that Tianqi Search violated user privacy and stole data. Although these were baseless slanders, pushed by capital, they multiplied until 3 people made a tiger. A lie repeated 1,000 times became truth. The reputation of future era plummeted. Daily active users suffered a cliff-like drop. Several of the company's core technical staff were aggressively poached by other big internet firms with offers 3 to 5 times higher. Under internal and external troubles, the whole company was plunged into turmoil. Even a professor called, worried sick. "Ethan, are you all right? I heard the Vanderbilt family over there has gone mad. Can you hold up?" "Professor, don't worry." Ethan's tone remained eerily calm. "They're only a few mad dogs. They still can't bring down a lion." He hung up the phone and looked at the gloomy sky outside the window, but a faint, icy smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. He was determined to make Jason lay out all his cards. Then he would show him what a true dimensionality-reducing strike really looks like. He summoned Joe and all of the company's core members and held a closed-door meeting. "Boss, what do we do now? We've lost over 30% of our users." "Yeah, 360 Security's blocking is fatal. Our tech team is trying to find ways to bypass it, but the results are poor. And those hired trolls are disgusting. Our fact-checking can't keep up with how fast they spread rumors." The conference room was filled with an air of gloom. Ethan, however, simply listened calmly, saying nothing. Only after everyone had finished speaking did he slowly stand up and walk to the whiteboard. He picked up a marker and wrote 2 characters on the whiteboard. "Open source." Everyone was stunned. Open source?" Zhou asked uncertainly. "Ethan, do you mean make the core algorithm of Apocalypse completely public?" "That's right." Ethan nodded. "No, absolutely not." The company's COO, a senior executive poach from a major firm, immediately stood up to object. "Mr. Johnson, this is the foundation of our survival. If we open source it, we'll have no technical barriers left. Those giants will tear us apart like wolves." "Who said we were going to open source Apocalypse?" Ethan smiled. There was a touch of mischief in his smile. He turned around and wrote 3 more characters on the whiteboard. "Pangu. From today onward, Future Era will officially launch the Pangu project." Ethan's voice echoed in the quiet conference room, filled with a kind of magical power. "We will build a brand new, completely open-source mobile operating system that belongs to us. This system will be more open than Android, smoother than iOS, and more secure. Most importantly, it will have our latest generation AI engine built in, which cannot be intercepted by any security software. Apocalypse Search is just one application of this engine. 360 Security wants to shut us down? Fine. Those giants want to copy us? Bring it on. I'll let them know that what they've schemed so hard to destroy was nothing more than a scale we casually discarded. While they're still imitating us, we will already be standing atop the crest of the next era's wave. I will make every mobile phone manufacturer in the world beg us to use our Pangu system. I will make Jason and all the capital behind him watch with their own eyes how I use the very rules they pride themselves on to personally bury them." The entire conference room was silent. Every face was etched with extreme shock and fervor. They felt as if they were not attending a company meeting, but witnessing with their own eyes a god issuing his epic-making, sacred declaration of war to the entire mortal world. At this moment, the disgraced Sophia was curled up in a dim, rented room in Jing City. She hadn't eaten for several days, her body wasted beyond recognition, her eyes bloodshot and wild. She refused to accept it. She refused to accept that she would just fall from the clouds and become a puddle of rotten mud. She blamed all her grievances on Ethan. It was Ethan who ruined everything for her. If I can't be happy, then you won't be allowed to be happy either. A malicious thought took root in her heart. She remembered the previous life, when Ethan sold his parents' only house for her. She knew that uncle and aunt were Ethan's only soft spots. She took out her phone, used a newly purchased number, and dialed Ethan's mother, Elizabeth. After the call connected, she didn't speak. She only let out a series of eerie, hair-raising cold laughs. Then, in a voice full of venom, as if coming from hell itself, she spoke word by word. "Auntie, do you know? Your son, he's about to die, and you will soon go down there to join him." After saying that, she hung up and flushed the SIM card down the drain. She had no idea that this foolish and vicious act of hers would summon upon herself, and her last pillar of support, Jason, a cataclysmic, endless fury from the demon god. Seaside City, top-tier sea view apartment. Elizabeth held the phone, her face deathly pale, her whole body trembling. That strange call, like a cold, poisonous snake, instantly gripped her heart. Richard. She called out to her husband in a trembling voice. Richard Johnson came out of the study, and when he saw his wife in a dazed, distraught state, his heart dropped. "What's wrong? What happened?" Elizabeth repeated the phone call just now, haltingly, sentence by sentence. Richard Johnson's face also darkened instantly. Although they knew it was very likely a prank, as parents the thing they feared most was hearing such terrible news about their child. Just as the two of them were uneasy, Ethan's call came through. "Mom, what's wrong? I was just checking the home surveillance and noticed your heart rate was a bit off." Ethan's voice was as calm as ever, yet carried a reassuring strength. Hearing her son's voice, Elizabeth's half-held breath finally eased, but she couldn't help sobbing as she recounted what had just happened. Silence on the other end of the line. A long, death-like silence. Elizabeth could even feel an invisible, icy chill being transmitted through the phone line. "Mom, I understand." After a long while, Ethan's voice finally sounded again. "Don't you two go out these few days. I'll arrange the best security personnel to go over. Leave the rest to me. I guarantee that the person who made the call will pay a price 10,000 times more painful than death for every single word she said." After hanging up, Ethan stood by the office's floor-to-ceiling window, watching the unending river of cars outside. There was no expression on his face. But if you could look straight into his eyes, you would find that there was no longer any human emotion in them. Only an endless abyss remained, burning with black flames. Sophia. Taylor. He slowly and deliberately chewed over the name in his mind. He thought that crushing her into the dust, ruining her reputation, was the greatest punishment. He was wrong. For a venomous snake who had long since lost all humanity, any mercy would be cruelty to oneself. She touched his only untouchable reverse scale. "Then don't blame me for erasing you and everything behind you completely from this world." Ethan dialed Titan. "Did you get it?" "Boss, mission accomplished." On the other end of the line came Titan's excited voice. "The Swiss bank's firewall was even more fragile than I thought. Every transfer the Vanderbilt family laundered over the past 20 years through offshore trusts, underground banks, art auctions, and other channels is all here. The total amount is staggering." "Good." Ethan's voice was cold, without the slightest warmth. "Package all the evidence and send it to the top 100 media outlets worldwide, and also to the highest anti-corruption agency's real name reporting email. Also, help me locate someone. Sophia. I need to know exactly where she is right now, precise down to the street number. I want her to watch with her own eyes how her last hope is, little by little, turned to ashes." 3 days later, Jason and Sophia's engagement banquet was held as scheduled at the top 7-star hotel in Jing City. Although the Vanderbilt family was currently under intense scrutiny, a dying camel is still bigger than a horse. Those who attended were still the most prominent figures in Jing City. Jason needed this grand banquet to prove to the outside world that his Vanderbilt family had not fallen. He was wearing a white custom tuxedo, still as debonair as ever, as if all the previous negative news had nothing to do with him. Sophia, meanwhile, wore a custom wedding dress worth tens of millions of dollars, her makeup exquisitely done, her arm linked with Jason's, a victor's sickly flush on her face. She thought she had won. As long as she could marry into the Vanderbilt family, she could return to the top. As for Ethan, in her eyes, he was nothing more than a pathetic little clown about to be crushed by the Vanderbilt family. The banquet reached its climax, and the host invited Jason and Sophia onto the stage to receive everyone's blessings. Just as Jason took the microphone, ready to deliver his grandiose, high society speech, every screen in the banquet hall suddenly went black. Immediately after, one shocking piece of evidence after another about the Vanderbilt family's overseas money laundering appeared on every screen like falling snow. Clear bank statements, secret trust agreements, forged auction records. Each item alone was enough to consign the entire Vanderbilt family to ruin. The whole room fell dead silent. All the guests looked at Jason on the stage with a kind of stunned, ghost-seeing expressions, watching his face turn deathly pale. No, this isn't real. It's forged. It's Photoshop. Jason barked out of control. However, the next second the screen shifted. Someone everyone had never expected appeared. Ethan. He was leisurely sitting in his office, smiling as he watched everyone in the banquet hall through the camera. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. His voice, carried through the venue's speakers, reached each person's ears clearly. I'm sorry to disturb the two of you on your engagement celebration. I just wanted to take this opportunity to broadcast a little fireworks show to everyone. He snapped his fingers. On the screen appeared a real-time candlestick chart of the global financial markets. The stocks representing the Vanderbilt Group and all publicly listed companies associated with the Vanderbilt family. At that moment, as if receiving a command from hell, plunged vertically in an unprecedented fashion, wildly smashing down to their limit-down levels. No. Jason let out a despairing, inhuman wail. He knew it was over. Everything was over. His family, his empire, everything he took pride in, vanished into dust at the snap of this man's fingers. And that was not the end. On the screen, Ethan's gaze slowly turned toward Jason's side, to Sophia, who had long since collapsed to the ground in shock, her face drained of color. A devilish, icy smile curled at the corner of his mouth. Sophia, I told you not to show up in my world again. Now, it's time for you to pay for your own stupidity. No sooner had the words fallen than the banquet hall doors were flung open by a group of uniformed, armed police officers. The lead officer walked up to Jason, whose face had long since gone ashen, and produced an arrest warrant. Jason, you're suspected of massive money laundering, market manipulation, and hiring someone to assault. Come with us. On the other side, several plainclothes officers walked up to Sophia. Sophia, you are suspected of instigating injury and of threatening others' personal safety. Please cooperate with our investigation. Sophia's pupils dilated instantly. Her whole body went limp like a puddle of rotten mud and collapsed to the ground. She looked at the man on the screen who, from his lofty position, pronounced her fate like a god. She finally understood what kind of terrifying demon from hell she had provoked. Endless darkness swallowed her completely. The collapse of the Vanderbilt family was faster and more complete than anyone had imagined. In the face of that mountain of ironclad evidence, any struggle was futile. Jason's father suffered a sudden heart attack and died in the interrogation room on the night he was taken away by the investigative agency. All assets under the Vanderbilt Group were seized and auctioned by the court. This once century-old family that stood at the pinnacle of the Capitol was uprooted and vanished in less than a month. Jason was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to life imprisonment. As for Sophia, She was sentenced to 3 years for instigating injury and for intimidation and threats. When she was brought before the court and heard the verdict, she neither cried nor made a scene. She just smiled dazedly, repeatedly murmuring one sentence: "I'm not worthy. It's me who's not worthy." She went insane. After experiencing the huge fall from Cloud 9 to hell, and having all her mental defenses completely shattered by Ethan's godlike and demonic methods, her reason finally collapsed utterly. For Ethan, the grudge that had lasted 2 lifetimes finally came to an end in the most thorough and decisive way. He didn't pay attention to the fates of those losers, because they no longer deserved to occupy even a second of his thoughts. He devoted all his energy to the research, development, and promotion of the Pangu system, backed by the massive user base accumulated through the Tianqi search and the dimensionality-reducing power of the Nuwa AI engine. Once released, the Pangu system triggered an unprecedented technological revolution worldwide. It was more open and smoother than Android, solving the fragmentation and lag problems that had long plagued the Android system. It is smarter and more secure than iOS. Its built-in Nuwa engine can provide users with truly personalized, meticulous services tailored to each individual. On the day of the launch, among the world's top 10 smartphone manufacturers, all 9 besides Apple, including giants like Samsung, Huawei, and Xiaomi, announced on the spot that they would fully adopt the Pangu system and become the first members of the Pangu Ecosystem Alliance. Thanks to the Pangu system, the epic of the future broke the United States' decades-long monopoly in the mobile operating system field in one fell swoop, becoming a new tech hegemon the world could no longer ignore. Ethan's name also rang out across the globe. He graced the cover of Time magazine, hailed as the tech godfather of the new century and the digital god from the East. The empire he single-handedly built had long since surpassed the scale of his previous life. He stood at the pinnacle of the world, possessing wealth and power beyond ordinary imagination. He could effortlessly influence a nation's economy, stand on equal footing with the world's top leaders, and determine the way millions live. He fulfilled every promise he had once made to his parents. Richard Johnson and Elizabeth moved into the finest house in Quanhai City, enjoying top-tier medical care and lifestyle services. They no longer had to worry about making a living. Their only daily dilemma was which country to travel to next. Zhou also became the hottest tech guru in the industry. He was no longer the timid, insecure youth, but an industry leader who could speak eloquently and command a crowd of tens of thousands. Everything was heading toward the most perfect ending. However, late at night, when everything was quiet, Ethan stood alone in that excessively empty top-floor Seaview apartment, overlooking the city lights below that glittered like the Milky Way, and a strange, vast emptiness would often swell up in his chest. He had won. He had won the whole world. But he also seemed to have lost something. He had lost his anger, lost his hatred, and also lost that burning feeling of pursuing a goal recklessly with everything he had. The flame of vengeance had once been the only light in his life, but now the flame had gone out, leaving nothing but an endless cold ash. He opened that long-sealed account on the overseas trading website. Inside, a single Bitcoin lay quietly. It was the one he had deliberately left behind back then, the first and last witness that he hadn't sold a single coin of. He stared at that familiar string of numbers, which stood for both wealth and the beginning, his eyes a little dazed. He suddenly remembered the 17-year-old boy in the internet cafe who had bet everything and pressed the buy button. He remembered the 18-year-old top scorer in the exam hall, furiously scribbling and vowing to make everyone see him in a new light. He remembered the young avenger in the alley, watching his brother fall into a pool of blood as a raging desire for vengeance ignited within him. Those vivid, blazing emotions, full of love and hate, seemed like matters from a past life. Now he was more like a precise, cold god, made up of countless lines of code and streams of data. He had everything, except for a heartbeat. He walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a glass of wine. Then he dialed a number from Europe that he hadn't contacted in a long time. Hello, Titan. It's me. Do me a favor. Help me transfer all the shares of Future Era into an anonymous, non-profit charitable foundation. The foundation will be called Hope. Starting tomorrow, I, Ethan, will resign from all positions at Future Era. I'm going to live a new life. When the news came out, the world was thrown into an uproar. At the peak of his career, he chose to quit without notice, donate all his wealth, and retreat to the mountains. No one could understand Ethan's decision. Countless media outlets tried every method to interview him, to probe his true thoughts. Countless business partners and subordinates pleaded with him, begging him to change his mind. But Ethan seemed to have evaporated from the world, completely disappearing from everyone's sight. He told no one where he had gone, including his parents and Joe. He only left a letter.